arguing about whether you should have a degree or not.
Yeah.
I have a feeling TNA most probably supports that members of parliament should have a TNA, should have a degree. I know very clearly Kenya does not. Why? Because if you have a threshold that says that a member of parliament must have a degree, then what you've actually done is turn out quite a number of people who believe in what Mkenya's collective stands for. Mkenya is trying to push a situation of a level playing ground. They've got historical injustices that they're worried about, things that have happened in the past that have never been dealt with, issues of land, issues of marginalization and disempowerment. Now, if you tell me that those young people would be able to actually sit within TNA and fit, I'd have to say you're lying.
Well, he's not correct, because indeed they would fit, though he brings another point which perhaps is not what you've asked about, with respect to whether, for instance, the young person who has been disadvantaged education-wise then does not find a place in this political space, or political idea or political platform called TNA. Of course they do, but the question is this: just like in a football game, it's like the goalkeeper now saying, now, you guys are completely unfair because you do not allow me to
touch the ball.
To be the striker in the game. I mean, you need to understand first and foremost how even a football game is played. There's a reason why the goalkeeper is the guy that is between the sticks.
Connect that to
just a moment, Gujiri. Just a moment. Let me explain to you, because you need to be able to logically connect these dots. The idea, for instance, that a certain education qualification is important to articulate a certain job, you must understand why. What is a member of parliament, for instance? And you see, and I hope many people listening to this, this is exactly why Kenya has had problems in any case in the past, because we don't even understand the very job you're giving that person. This is a member of the legislative body. And I can see Gujiri has a Constitution of the Republic here on the desk.
Yes.
Can he read what the responsibility of the of Parliament is? Parliament is a policy and law-making body. Can you have, for instance, if I'm not able, for example, to understand certain policy or legal things around climate change, and today I was expected to go represent the country in Rio, what are you expecting me to do? We are not saying that you must be a master's student or a doctorate student, but there's a certain level of understanding and knowledge that is important for the better articulation of that job. And we understand, and it is true, that there are certain experiences that you can have that can equate you to somebody who has got education. So academic knowledge is not the only sort of knowledge that is required. But to say it is not important,
but it's important,
is something which is not.
I have not said it is important.
I wonder what, and let's hear what the New Democrats stand for actually on this issue.
I'm very happy about the direction this whole thing is taking, because eventually, after the dust settles, we're going to discuss a few issues, which is what we stand for as a Hoja Alliance. Right. Now, the issue
that's a good one.
Gunjiri is bringing here about members of Kenya, not having been privileged, maybe having less education level. I would like to tell him clearly that we have people who are completely illiterate in New Democrats.
Oh. Completely illiterate?
Yeah, people who have not had a chance to attend school. But the argument here is not whether they need to be members of party or not members of the party. Everybody is allowed to be a member of the party, whether you have a PhD, whether you're literate, as long as you subscribe to the issues that we want to deal with as a party. So let's make that very clear. We are not saying that anyone who's doesn't have a degree should not come to New Democrats, they should go to Kenya. As a matter of fact, I'll suggest they come to New Democrats, because you see, we accommodate the whole range.
That's the best place for them.
That's the best place for them. But most important, when Kenya consolidates all these people who are disenfranchised, maybe educationally, who have some historical injustices they would like to settle, what mechanisms are they proposing to have in place that will help them achieve this? Because like we said, all these issues have to be handled from a legislative viewpoint. If you have members of parliament, if you have people who are going to join the Senate, governors, this will be the administrators. These are the only people who have the capacity to be able to correct any of those issues.
Right.
Now, if you put together all people who do not meet the threshold to get elected into the legislature, how are you going to address the issues that Kenya seeks to redress, for example?
So basically you're saying Kenya is just going to be left as a noise-making body, which will never be able to move from
into parliament.
From making noise to actually making a change.
They might have legitimate concerns, but the approach is meant to fail.
I think it's important for me to clarify something. First and foremost, the whole idea of having a degree to be a member of parliament, UK, actually, advanced developed democracies don't have a requirement for you to have a degree to be a member of parliament. They assume that once you go to a voter, and I have a degree and you don't have, and we're running for the same office, the voter will be able to make a distinction between who he actually wants in office and who he doesn't want. They don't legislate academic basic requirements up to a certain level. In Kenya, I don't even know any other country, maybe except Rwanda, that has a requirement for a degree for a legislator. Number two, Peter talked about the need for you to be able to understand the climate change. Remember, the work of a legislator, the work of a member of parliament. Member of a parliament is a representative of the people who come from a particular constituency. He's a messenger sent by that constituency to parliament to go and articulate the issues of his constituency and try and ensure that his constituency is represented when policies are being made.
Something bothers me when as you go along in this discussion. Yes. Something is bothering me. You're actually saying that, because I am a member of parliament for a certain constituency, I should just restrict my thought process to the issues affecting that constituency.
That's where I was going.
Because that's where we end up asking questions. The question time we spend a lot of time saying, road A, bridge B, how come the shop C was closed?
Eric, you interrupted me before I finished. Kenya has a transition rate of 2%. Out of every 1,000 children who go to primary school, 20 make it to university. 20. Kenya today, out of 30 million adults, 200,000 have university degrees. Now, what you're telling me, the Constitution says that every Kenyan adult has the right to run for political office. An adult is 18 years old and above. I don't know how many 18-year-olds have degrees. It doesn't matter how smart you are. In essence, what you have done is say that until you're 21 or 22 when you come out of university, you can't run for any political office, number one. Number two, getting a degree in Kenya is not just about how smart you are. Every January we see some very smart children who can't go to university because they don't have resources. In Kenya, university education is not free. You have to pay for it. So we have people in this country who cannot afford to pay university education. You're telling us that Parliament, out of the wisdom of its own house, realized that people like those cannot make members of Parliament. So I'm not saying that university education is not enough. I'm just saying, because that law says everybody has the right to run for public office without unreasonable restrictions. Telling me that a law that removes 200,000 out of 40 million people and leaves them with the only right to be members of parliament or governors or senators is reasonable is wrong.
Eric, quick, just let me say something. And this is the problem with sometimes with how we as Kenyans speak or articulate these issues. One, Ngujiri is using the word right. Where? Now, in that law, in the constitution, does it say that the only people who have a right to run for political office must have a degree? There's nowhere.
That's a law they passed in parliament.
Not right. It's talking about a qualification. And one needs to distinguish the language of qualification, the language of discrimination, and the language of rights. And if indeed you want to be to offer and proffer leadership to the people you're working with, it is important that we invest a lot of time in distinguishing to the Kenyan public what these things mean. They are not the same. Absolutely. Which is why, for instance, if
so which is more important in your
I'm not. All of them work together, and that is why. And I'll tell you one thing, and I'll mention this, Eric. The thing is, for example, as TNA, we are saying this. We want to move away from the ideology that a political leader is that person occupying a particular office. We are saying, Kenyans, together we can work and walk towards our destiny. Everyone playing their part. There is a part to be played by that person who occupies a particular office, but I can tell you the larger part, in fact, is played by the ordinary person wherever they are. And this is the philosophy that we're pushing. But you see, unfortunately, there are those who are still lost in the past, where they think the only people who control everything the destiny of the country
Other people in
are a
Parliament.
group of 300 or so persons sitting in a particular body called Parliament or whatever it is. Those are the ones. And we're saying, no, sorry, that is the Kenya of yesterday. The Kenya of tomorrow is where 40 million people, their ideas, their aspirations out there, wherever you are the person who is changing Kenya. And that is the
Again,
complete
again, I want to support Peter on this point and deal another blow to Gonjiri here. Because when he reads the Constitution, he ought to read the whole Constitution.
Oh, I do.
Because you look at Section 99 of that Constitution, it talks about a member of Parliament or any person aspiring for that elected post should meet any educational, moral and ethical requirements.
Finish it, please. Please just read it.
Moral and ethical requirements prescribed by the Constitution or by an act of Parliament.
Yes.
Now, those are two very clear options. And when Parliament exercised that requirement to have
moral, ethical, and educational.
Educational.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so Parliament set a threshold and said, we prefer that anyone who wants to sit in Parliament as a member of Parliament, as a senator, then ought to meet this minimum level of education. So we should not be having that debate without looking at that context of the Constitution. And that's why I'm saying you cannot look at one part of the Constitution and ignore the other.
Let me explain.
Because
something.
Parliament has been given direct authority to do it.
Parliament has been given direct authority. Actually, I really love the fact that you said qualifications and disqualifications for election. That is, let me read it in full, what you just quoted. Unless disqualified under Clause 2, a person is eligible for election as a member of Parliament if the person satisfies any educational, moral, or ethical requirements prescribed by this Constitution or by an act of Parliament. Let me use a very interesting example. Okay, allow me to use TNA as an example. We've been running, this country has been having a public discussion about whether or not somebody who is indicted for crimes against humanity can run for presidential office. What has been the argument? That let the voters decide. That is ethical. That is an ethical issue. Parliament has refused to pass a law on an ethical bar, and they're saying let the voters decide. However, we've come now to a situation...
Can you really legislate ethics?
But it's here. It's actually in the Constitution.
Yeah, right.
They've said that Parliament has the capacity...
Mujiri is not telling you that there is a bill in Parliament. There is a bill in Parliament to do the exact same... You see, this is a problem.
Deals with Chapter 6
See, now he's saying that Parliament has refused. There is
No,
a bill in Parliament.
I haven't said they've refused. I said they haven't passed it.
So
in
it's in
fact,
the process.
They're political. TNA
So
as
let's
a
await
party
Parliament to pass
stands on the platform that the voters should decide whether or not you can run for
Gonjiri, do you have a
president.
problem with the previous requirement that you must be eloquent and fluent in both English and Swahili?
I don't.
You don't
I don't
have
for the
a problem
simple
with
reason
that?
because that expands the people who can actually run from office from 200,000 to a couple of million. And for me,
It still leaves,
that's what democracy is
it
about.
still leaves out a
But the
couple of
few
million.
millions
It does,
left
but
out
you
could
see-
also bring an issue.
You see, this is the situation. If you're going to be exclusive, how do you exclude 99% of the population with one law? And you see, we're actually talking about the Constitution. There is the issue about discrimination that is very, very clear about on what basis why you cannot discriminate. If you tell me that the access to university is universal in this country, you're lying. It's not true. So if you create, and you remember, this is a country where we have one of the largest companies. For you, there has to be a rational connection between how a degree. This Parliament, 65% of its members have degrees. You see, everybody is concentrating on the 83 people in that Parliament who don't have degrees. We forget that the others,
The majority
the remaining
have.
140 something,
The majority have
degrees.
degrees.
Yeah.
You would have to show me, for you to argue this, make this argument, you'd have to show me how it is that these people who have a degree now, or the people who don't have a degree now, have been unable to legislate.
I'll explain to Gunjiri now. In fact, that there is the trick. I wish we had the time to go into the Hansard of Parliament. And you begin to see the contributions
By
of
the
members
83.
of Parliament and their performance. In fact, my friend, you will just be quiet because you realize that the thing you're talking about is heavily influenced by how a particular member is